Welcome to the Nerd-stalgic Podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerd-stalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerd-stalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy Beans, and welcome back to the Howdy Beans podcast. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. As per usual, I will explain that introduction in a very quick second, but first of all, I want to do a bit of housekeeping, the first housekeeping of this brand new year. So make sure that you follow me on X at nerdstalgic_pod. If you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you listen to this on Spotify on your mobile phone, then don't forget to leave a 5-star rating. You can also find the Howdy Beans podcast on Good Pods as well as Apple Podcasts. Also, I just want to start quickly by saying a huge thank you to every single one of you, all 126 of you, yes, that many of you all, for your support, for listening to the show, not just in the past 3 years, but listening last year. And what I will explain in more detail in this sort of really chilled out episode is that this year had been my most successful year podcasting ever, not just on Spotify, but on YouTube. And I just want to thank everybody who has subscribed, who has liked, comment, shared, retweeted, had me on their podcast, people who have mentioned me on their podcast. Like, honestly, I don't want to sound cheesy, but I don't think people understand how much it means to me and how much I appreciate just listening to a random episode of a friend's podcast, and all of a sudden somebody goes, "Oh yeah, I was talking to Luke from Nerdstalgic, and he made a really good point on this movie or Doctor Who or whatever," and it generally means so much to me, because it just means that whatever it is I'm doing here, people are not only listening, but people are wanting to share with others. And it also goes to whenever I talk about a movie, I get people come to me and say, "You know what? I saw that movie that you was talking about. I thought that at first that film was trash, but you know what? I gave it a second view and it's not as bad, actually. Thank you for sort of recommending it." Or, "I never saw that movie in the first place, but you know what? I've gone to see it and it's actually pretty good." You know, or "I've read that book," or "I've played that game," or whatever. Like, whatever it is, it doesn't go unnoticed, and it means a lot to me. It really does, for have everybody's support. It, like, generally, if I wasn't currently ill right now as recording this, I would get emotional and cry, because it really means a lot to me. So I just want to do a really quick sort of start by saying thank you to everybody. You're all wonderful, and I genuinely love you all, and just don't change, and hopefully you all stick around this year and you keep listening, and that we gain new followers on Spotify, we gain new subscribers on YouTube, and the podcast just grows and grows and grows. Now, I said I was going to explain it, and I will. So, you more than likely, you noticed in the beginning of this episode, I didn't say the Nerdstalgic podcast. I said the Howdy Beans podcast. Now, there is a reason for this. I'm doing a rebrand. I'm basically changing the name of the podcast. This will technically be the third time I've done this. And for good reasons, I'm doing it. So, for some people might not know, some people might know, but the long and short of it is the fact of, when I originally came up with my name of the Nerdstalgic podcast, I generally thought it was a unique and sort of organic sort of brain thought. It was just my brain being very sort of creative. I thought it was an original idea. It turns out that the name isn't as organic and as original as I thought. There is another person who has just the name Nerdstalgic, who has about 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And at first, when I found out, I thought it doesn't really matter, because I am the Nerdstalgic podcast. I'm going to be something different, and that you can differentiate the difference again in like his thumbnails look different to mine, and the content that I do is different to his, and X, Y, and Z. But in the last 2, maybe 3 months of 2023, I'm sorry, 2024, I had quite a few people basically come to me and said, "Oh, Luke, I really enjoyed that episode you did on X, Y, and Z." And I'll be like, "Oh, thank you. I haven't done an episode on X, Y, and Z." And they go, "Oh, yeah, you have." And I'm like, "No, I haven't." And they'd send me a link, and it would be that guy. And if it happens once, if it happens more than once, then it's a concern. Basically, when it happened at first, I thought, oh, it's okay. But when it happened a few more times, then I quickly realized I'm starting to grow in popularity. Not to toot my own horn, but more people are listening. I'm now on Apple Podcasts, and the podcast is growing. It's going to be seen by more people, and there's a high potentiality. If I keep the name, that people are going to sort of get me and this guy confused. And I had a lot of people say to me, "Oh, well, I've left that guy a review," and I'm the last thing I wanted is that guy to get a lot of people commenting about me, and then he finds my podcast and he goes, "Oh yeah, blah blah blah, you've copied my name." And I don't know if it will happen, but it was just that thought that was going through my head, and a lot of people were getting confused. And in the end, I basically decided, you know what? Time for a refresh. So I talked to a lot of podcasting friends of mine. If you listen to this, you know who you are. I talked to a bit of a brain trust and a close friend of mine, and we all basically agreed that, like, yeah, I don't have to change the name, but if the podcast is going to grow and I want it to be my personal thing, something that is personal to me and is not attached to anybody else in terms of name recognition, that is, it'd probably be best to change the name. So I've decided to change it to the Howdy Beans podcast, and for simple reasons, and to be honest, one for vanity and one for hilarity. So I'm already known, so I'm going to go with the vanity side. I'm already known as the bean guy. Okay, I'm known as the beans bloke on the indie podcasting realm. There are many times where I have had people message, not even just in 2024, I've had people message me or send me pictures of beans. I've had people, like, whenever people will be having random discussions on Twitter, and then people will tag me and go, "What do you think, Luke?" And then they'll put like some sort of meme or GIF of beans, and usually it is on something that somebody's posted was something related with beans or whatever. I find it funny. I lean into it. You know what I mean? I think it's hilarious because at the end of the day, it's funny, because it is funny. So I figured, well, I'm already known as the bean bloke already, and I have a catchphrase, which is Howdy Beans. And that's what everybody, again, I had a lot of people message me who go, "Howdy." Even though I'm not American and I'm not from like Texas, I still get a lot of people message me. Instead of saying hello, they say, "Howdy, Luke." You know what I mean? So I figured it's funny, and for a little vanity side of it, you know what? I'll just get rid of the nostalgic part, and I'll just keep the Howdy Beans podcast, because at the end of the day, I was thinking, well, you have like Chat Tsunami, you've got Review It Yourself, you've got Casting Views, you've got Doom Generation, you've like any of those names could really mean anything. They're not stagnatized by just one thing. Like at the end of the day, like if you looked at like Casting Views, for example, that is something that's unique to Dan, or you Review It Yourself is something unique to Sean, or Chat Tsunami is unique to Chatsu. And that is the sort of thing that I wanted. I wanted something that was more sort of unique to me. And I thought, well, Howdy Beans is very unique to me. So that is what I decided to go with. So the long and short of it, that is why I've changed the name. Also, which means why there is no introduction music in proper introduction music, because I now need to get new introduction music, because now I can't have that one because it says the nostalgic with the ginger bookworm, which neither of those things are relevant to me anymore. So yeah, I'm going to have to figure out how to basically get new intro music, and that will be my sort of goal for this year. But until then, it's going to be the same. Apart from the name change, everything is going to go exactly the same. The content will be the same. Me personally, I'm not going to change and all that. I've just changed the name, but I think it's going to work. I really do, and I'm really looking forward to this new name change. I really like it. I think it's funny. I think it's silly. I think it's unique, and it's very much me. And I've got loads of plans of things that I want to do for this month. and going forwards and going into sort of like 2025 as a whole. So yeah, hopefully people stick around and hopefully people enjoy the new name. And yeah, so I just wanted to sort of explain that really at the beginning. And so anyway, this is my third year celebration episode. In it, so if anybody is new to the podcast or new to what this episode is, I've been doing this since I basically started podcasting. So every year I do a big blowout, a big sort of celebration to not just say thank you to you guys, but also to look at my year of podcasting, to look what content I've looked at, what was successful, what wasn't. And again, it's a very chilled out and relaxed sort of conversation. It's really just me talking to you, obviously, which I do normally in terms of podcasting, but there's no real point to it. It is just me talking to you all about my year in podcasting, and that's what it is. So to start off on a high, I'm going to talk about my top 5 favorite movie sort of episodes from this year. Right. So my number 1 favorite episode that I covered this year, I covered all the way back at the beginning of 2024 for my birthday. I reviewed The Iron Giant. I absolutely love and adore this movie, and it is also one of my most successful, and we'll go into more information about that a bit later, but The Iron Giant is also my most successful episode last year. And it was my most listened to, and so many people, I had so much feedback, and so many people messaged me saying, how they didn't like, that's how good the movie is, and they were just talking about how great The Iron Giant is, and it was just so absolutely wonderful. Just to hear so many people talk positive about a film that I just love so much, and it is such a crucial moment to me, because the movie means a lot to me. It is a focal point, a foundation of who I am as a person. If you want full details, obviously go check the episode out. But I just love that film. And I feel like that was a fantastic starting block for this year. And I absolutely enjoyed it. So that is my number 1 favorite movie that I looked at this year. Coming in at number 2 was The Mummy. Again, I love The Mummy. I grew up with this film. It's on TV all the time, and I've actually watched it multiple times this year, not just for the podcast, but I also have seen it on TV multiple times on ITV2. And it just gets better every time I see it. The film ages so well. The cast is gorgeous, and I don't just mean that literally, I mean physically. Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, everybody is just gorgeous. Everybody is beautiful, and they're so talented. And oh, it's such a good movie. And again, it's just like Iron Giant. That movie was so successful for the podcast in terms of views on Spotify. It is my most successful episode ever on YouTube. It's got 15,000 views and incredibly stupid amount of likes. It's unbelievable how successful that is. And again, I'll go into full detail when I get down to breaking down YouTube. But it blew me away how successful that review was, and I'm just so proud of how successful the review was, that people listened to it, that people, not only because it was The Mummy, but people stayed on and listened to it for quite a long time, and a lot of people finished it, and it was just, yeah, it just means a lot, because I had so much fun watching the movie, and I grew up with it, and yeah, it was a fantastic time. So that's another one that I definitely recommend checking out. At number 3, I know a lot of people are going to probably hate me for this, but I don't care. At number 3, my third favorite review that I did this year, movie review, was The Cat in the Hat. I will die on this hill, and I will until I die. Ironically, is that The Cat in the Hat is not a terrible movie. It's not as bad as what everybody says. The Cat in the Hat is actually a very funny and good film. It's not a masterpiece. It's not Oppenheimer. It's not going to change your perspective on life. It's not Interstellar. It's Cat in the Hat at the end of the day. That's what it is. If you've read The Cat in the Hat, if you've read anything by Dr. Seuss, you will know that apart from the crass humor and the sort of the adult jokes, Michael Myers got pretty close with actually inheriting what The Cat in the Hat is. He is a mischievous character. He comes in messes up, makes a mess, causes trouble, causes havoc, is a bit crazy, is a bit mental, you know. But the lessons behind it for the children is that, you learn from your mistakes. You clean up your message. You basically don't just do things because you can, and X, Y, and Z, and all this jazz. And I love it. I remember watching it when it first came out, and I watch it now at 26 years old. And every single time I've seen this movie, I've never once sat here and gone, "This is shit." Never once. I sit there and go, "I love this film. I enjoy it. It makes me giggle." And as I get older, it just gets better because I just find more and more adult jokes. Granted, some of the jokes weren't needed, but that's not the point. It's the cat in the hat. It's yeah, you know. Granted, I understand the criticism. I do. I'm not blind to it, but it's just a film that no matter how much people try to fight me on it, it is a film that I will die on the hill for, and I don't care. I love that movie, and I had to defend it. And there is another movie that I'm going to look at this year that I'm also going to defend that everybody hates, but I love. And I'm not going to spoil it here, but look out for it because I'm going to defend it because it is a great film that definitely doesn't deserve the hate it gets. So at number 4, this was a hard one because I was going to put this one at number 3, but again, because I love Cat in the Hat so much, it had to go up to number 3. But at number 4 was my review of Charlie Brown the movie. That film, still now, I haven't seen the film since I did the review, but still it's a film that sits with me because it is just gorgeous. If you've seen the Charlie Brown movie, it is beautiful. It is one of the best sort of movie adaptations I have ever seen. And it is probably one of the best because it takes the material that is on the comic books. It's on from the original animated movies. It took that material and was so authentic to the source material that it just works. It's just like, I shouldn't like it because in the UK, we don't have Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown is not really a thing here as it is in America. There is no reason why I should have attachment to it. I have no childhood attachment, no nostalgia, nothing at all. But when I watch it, I feel like I've known these characters my whole life. I feel like a huge kinship to them. I just can't explain it. It is just a beautiful movie, and it is one of those where I feel like it didn't deserve to flop. It didn't flop, but it didn't do as well as it should have done. You know what I mean? And again, that was another one of them movies that when I reviewed it, I had so many people come to me and go, "I didn't know that movie existed." And they went and watched it and they came back to me and they said, "That movie was gorgeous." And I'm like, damn straight it is. More people need to hear about how good this film is. So, generally, again, that's another one. Do yourself a favor, watch the Charlie Brown movie. And like, granted, it might not be a Christmas film, but it's got snow. It's wintry, and again, when this episode comes out, it's going to be cold and wintry still, especially here in the UK. Anyway, so might as well give it a watch. It's absolutely fantastic. I love and enjoy it. I could be here talking for hours about it, but we haven't got the time. We've got other things to talk about. But yeah, the Charlie Brown movie is at number 4. And at my top 5, my 5th favourite film that I watched and reviewed this year was The Blob. Not the Steve McQueen one, the 1980s Blob that I did for my spooky sort of month episode. Like last year, say 2023, I watched The Stuff, and that was my favourite of all time, sort of top of the list, favourite B-tier horror movie, right? Because if you've seen The Stuff, you know how good it is. It is just everything that you want from a B horror film and more, and it was incredible. But then I watched The Blob, and I fell in love with the practical effects, with the gore, with everything about it. And it was one of them films that, like, there was so much love that went into it, and the practical effects still hold up, and it still looks great. That even though it was made in the 80s, if you told me that was made in the late 90s, early 2000s, I would have believed you because it just looks still great. And it's a wonderful film. Yes, it's very gruesome, but it's fantastic. And I know they're on about doing a reboot of it. It scares me because it's going to be CGI. And if they don't do practical effects, it's not going to be as good. But that doesn't matter because if the new one's terrible, we've still got the originals to fall back on. And this one is incredible. It is amazing. It still has one of the best scenes in horror that I've seen in years, which is where you've got the waitress in the cafe. She goes out to phone the sheriff. She gets into the phone booth. She's phoning up. She's going, I need the sheriff. I need the sheriff. And obviously the blob's going over the phone booth, and she's like, and the woman on the end of the receiver is like, well, the sheriff is already there. And then as soon as that, you just get a shot behind her of the sheriff's face. You don't see him get eaten, but he's already been eaten. He's already been devoured, and he's got his face up against it, and the blob is going to take her. And it's one of the best scenes in horror I've seen this year. And again, do yourself a favor, watch the blob. Just do it. You will not be disappointed. It is one of the best. So, I would say the Stuff and the Blob are top tier level at number one of just being some of the best horror I have seen in a long time. And it's ironic that I had to go back into the 80s to find it. But you know what? I found it and I love it and I adore it. And it's one that everybody needs to check out. And I really hope to see more people this year, especially for Halloween, watching and reviewing the Blob. I want to see people watch it and review it because it is generally that good. I absolutely love and adore it. I really, really do. Also, before we move on, one thing that I do want to mention, a bit of a bonus episode. I wanted to cover this because I feel like, one, a lot of work went into it. Well, a good almost 2 years of work went into it before I could actually finish doing the review. And also because it was one of them sort of episodes that meant a lot to me. And also, it kind of leads into what I'll be covering this year. So my bonus episode, favorite episode that I did this year, was my Doctor Who Series 2 breakdown special. The reason why that episode is so special and why it took me so long to get actually around to reviewing Series 2 of Doctor Who with David Tennant and Billy Piper was simply because how I was doing it. So I was watching an episode, I read a book, I watched another episode, and I read another one of the novels. And I did it in tandem that way. So once I'd finished doing that, once I finished all the novels and I finished the series, I actually went back and watched Series 2 from start to end all over again. And then I could start writing up the review, writing up the bullet points, and then actually thinking my thoughts together, and then reviewing Series 2 overall. And it was about 2 years of work. And I really, I like it. Just sadly, it was an episode that didn't do very well. It didn't do very well on Spotify. It didn't do very well on YouTube. That doesn't really bother me. I just wanted to highlight it here because I had such a fantastic time with the novels. Even when like the novels weren't the best, which again I still enjoyed them. The novels were just teleport. What the novels have done, and what I've realised with Doctor Who now, is the fact of, even though modern Doctor Who might not be for me anymore, that is okay. That's fine. And I don't mind it, because what the novels have shown me is the fact of there's another side of Doctor Who that I've always wanted to see, and that the books are doing things that the show can't do because of time and budget. And I love that. And same with Big Finish, is the fact of I do want to look at Big Finish this year, or potentially next year. Hopefully I want to look at more Big Finish sort of titles, because what they are doing with Doctor Who is absolutely incredible. And that is why I enjoyed myself so much of reviewing Series 2, is because it just it broadened my mind to be like, Doctor Who is no longer just a show. It's also Big Finish. It's also novels. It's also graphic novels and other sort of stories. And it just led me to another sort of exploration into a different side of Doctor Who, and it really sort of changed me as a Doctor Who fan. So I wanted to highlight it here. But also, the reason why I wanted to highlight it is because it links into what I'll be covering next year. So a bit of a sort of a teaser for anybody who's listening. So up until this point, when you get to Series 2, when you finish Series 2, if you look at the Doctor Who in chronological order in terms of the series, when Series 2 finished, Torchwood started. Right, and then when Torchwood ended, Series 3 with David Tennant and Martha Freeman, not Martha Freeman. I can't remember her name now. But Martha Jones, basically. I can't remember her name. I remember last name's Freeman, but I can't remember her name. Margaret Freeman. I can't remember. Basically, where you've got sort of the Doctor and you've got Martha. So what I've decided to do, because I haven't watched Touchwood, and I know Sean from Review Itself is he keeps beating me up about it. He's like, "How have you not seen Torchwood?" I'm like, "I never got the chance to watch it. It was between Doctor Who, Primeval, and Torchwood, and I always chose Doctor Who." And then that choice, I got to watch Doctor Who, and then my parents were like, "Okay, your time with the TV's gone," and my parents took control of the TV, so I never got to watch it. Okay, so I'm going to make up for it now. So this year, I'm going to be looking into series 1 of Torchwood. One of the upsides of Torchwood, and I should be able to get this review out a lot quicker than I did with Doctor Who, is because the series came out first, and then the books came out after. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to watch Touchwood. And then I'm going to review the series, and then I'll review the first. I think there's about 3. The first 3 or first 4 Torchwood novels that link into the show. And then I'll watch Doctor Who Series 3, and then I'll read the Martha books as well as I'll watch the show, as I did here. So it'll take me a while before I get to sort of Peter Capaldi and Matt Smith. But, you know, I enjoy it. I enjoy the grind. I enjoy the exploration. It's a lot of fun. And a lot of people enjoy it as well because a lot of people listen to the episodes. So I just want to do a bit of a sneak peek for anybody who is a Doctor Who fan, who's hoping for more Doctor Who sort of content from me this year. There is more Doctor Who content to come. But it will be Touchwood first, and then there'll be Doctor Who afterwards. But it's all in the same universe. So it's not as bad. So moving on to Spotify. So like I said, this year Spotify has been absolutely incredible. And I ended the year with 126 followers on Spotify, which to me is incredible. Is crazy. Also, I think it was actually in 2024 I actually managed to get to 2K, and by the end of it, I had currently, as recording this, 2,819 downloads. It just shot up out of nowhere. 819 downloads, and absolutely insane. This is as recording. As of recording this, I've still got. I'm currently recording this on the 18th of December. This episode won't come out until the beginning of January anyway. So I've still got 2 weeks left of December, so that number will go up probably a bit. So it's just insane to me how much the podcast has grown on Spotify. And I've done this before throughout the years. I talk about the demographics, but yeah, the audience size has gone up, the plays per episode have gone up. I'm trying to find my section that I usually look at, but for some reason Spotify, they're basically changed. Here we go, audience. So this bit I like. So this is the Spotify audience demographics. This is sort of all Spotify's data, and I like to talk about this because I always find it quite fascinating because it always fluctuates and changes. So in terms of the people that are listening, so 89.3% are male, 9.3% are female, 1.3% are non-Pacific, and 0% are sort of non-binary. As for age, so the 0 to 17 age range are about 42.7%, 0% for anybody who's 18 to 22. So somehow I've got to get into the 18 to 22 market. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but we'll figure it out this year. The 23 to 27 is at 28%. The 28 to 34 demographic is at 13.3%. And the 35 to 44 demographic is currently at 14.7%, and the 45 to 59 and the 60 plus are currently at 0. So I've also got to find a way to get to those older markets as well. I've got a few plans next year that I think I'll be able to get into those older demographics, but we will see. Make sure if you've got grandparents who like old movies, let them know. Let them know that things are coming, and if they're interested in listening to a British bloke talk about old films, maybe. I don't know, just a hint. Just think, maybe, let me know. Anyway, onto the sort of demographics. So my geographic location for all platforms. So my 3 most successful on Spotify. So you've got United Kingdom is at 91%. and then 4% are from Canada, and then 4% are from Ireland. As for all platforms, so again, UK being at 68%, United States is currently at 28%, and then it goes from 1% for Germany, and then it gets 1% Canada, 1% Portugal, 1% Netherlands, 1% Israel, 1% Colombia. Oh, God, 1% Philippines, 1% Denmark, India, Russia, Australia, Brazil, the Netherlands, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Indonesia, Hong Kong. The list goes on and on and on. So there are people listening in all these different places. And again, thank you if you are in any of those locations that you are listening. It generally means a lot to me. As for sort of platforms in terms of apps, so 50.3% of you all are listening to this currently on Spotify. 30.2% of you all are listening to this on Spotify for creators. 13.4% of you are web browsers. This is a new one since obviously I joined Apple this year, which is a big thing for me because, again, if you've listened to the podcast long enough, you know I don't like Apple at all. But I basically had a big summer drought. During the summer, I had less and less viewers with each episode. People just stopped listening. And I thought, well, okay, summer drought, it happens to everybody. There's always a sort of a drought, basically. Yeah, it's not just me. And I thought, okay, it'll pick up as we get to the colder months. It didn't. It didn't pick up at all. It didn't go any higher. It stagnated, really. And I won't lie, I never thought about stopping podcasting, but it did get a bit depressing. It was like I'm putting all this effort in and no one's listening and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I spoke to my friend Sean from Review It Yourself, and he basically sort of spoke a bit of sort of common sense to me of like, Luke, at the end of the day, you've got to get on Apple. I know you don't like it, but you've just got to. So I bit the bullet and I did it. And I got myself onto Apple. And from doing that, I got myself onto Good Pods as well. And from there, I saw great success. I've seen a lot more sort of uptake in views, in people listening. And that's where a lot of the views I managed to bolster in terms of hundreds of views came from, was just being on Apple. And I hate to admit it, but it worked. You know what I mean? I got myself out of that drought and it gave me a new revitalization on wanting to carry on doing the podcast because it was like, oh, well, actually, people are now listening. I've got to now put the effort in. You know what I mean? It's no longer just 2 to 3 people listening. It is 5 to 8, which doesn't sound like a lot, but to me, it was and it is. So it was like, okay, I've actually got to put effort into it now. I've actually got to give a shit. Which, not saying I didn't give a shit before, but you know what I mean? Like, I've actually got to put a lot more sort of work into it now because people are listening and it's going to more places and it's going to more platforms. So it was one of those where it's like, okay, I'll do it now. I'll keep going. Thank you, everybody. So if you are listening and you discovered the podcast through Apple Podcasts, thank you very much. It means the world to me. And, you know, thank you for continuing to listen on Apple. But yeah, so 4.7% is from Apple. I'm sure in 2025 that number will grow. So when I do my wrap up in 2026 for 2025, that number will potentially grow. We will see. As for, it just says other. So other, which that could be probably other platforms, is at 1.3%. As for devices, I like this one because it always makes me giggle. So 52.3% of you all are listening to this on an Android device. 30.2% of you all are listening on a web. 8.7% are listening on your iPhone. 4.7% are listening on Windows, and 4% are listening to on a Mac device. Which again, there's the iPhone and the Mac device. The iPhone's not new, but the Mac device is. So again, Apple, it is working. I might not like Apple, but it's working at the end of the day. So you know, it's helping. When am I doing that? Wrapped. So this is the next thing I'm going to do. So I do this every year. I look at my Wrapped. As it's loading, I want to mention I had this bit of discussion with I can't remember the guy's name now, but we had a bit of discussion on X, basically so Spotify basically collects your data throughout the year. And then they stop collecting your data in October for some unknown reason, right? So they stop getting all your data in October, which was annoying for me because I had my most successful month of the year was in November. Was when I joined Apple. Is when I had the huge spike and a lot of people started, a lot more new followers and people started subscribing on Spotify and people started listening on Apple. And I was like, oh, I finally got this big burst of listeners. And it hasn't been counted at all. So this data is a little bit off. and I will mention where it's off, and I will add the corrections here and there. But I just made me laugh is all. So it's now loaded. So let's go. So fans were really loving your show in 2024. Yeah, you took it to a whole new level this year, apparently. Did I? So in terms of streams, I had a 90% increase in streams, which is incredible. As for followers, I had a 51% gain in followers from last year, from 2023, which is absolutely incredible. Give it up for my new fans. Don't know if you can hear that. That's me clapping. Hopefully it came through on the mic. So yeah, thank you all for you. So 71% of my listeners discovered me this year. So again, 71 of you. Thank you for checking me out and sticking with me. Again, you don't understand how much I appreciate you. It really means a lot to me. Your fans have a clear favourite. Your top episode was the Iron Giant, which again, that when I read that in the Wrapped, I almost started to cry because that movie means so much to me. It is literally the foundation of my life, of who I am as a person. And to know not only that other people love that movie as well, but people loved the review. Like that was probably one of the most positive responses I've ever had to anything I've ever done. I had so many people come to me, talk to me how good that movie was and how much they loved the review. And I had so many people who had never heard of me, who heard that review and decided to stay. I actually got a lot of new followers on Spotify and YouTube because of that movie. And yeah, I'm just so glad that of all the things I've done this year, that was my most successful. And it so happened to be on my birthday as well when I did that episode. So again, just thank you. Generally, like if you found the podcast from listening to the Iron Giant and you decide to stick around, thank you. Really does. And thank you for listening to it and thank you for sharing it, because I'm so glad that episode is as successful as it was, and it still is. And I thank you. It was streamed 105% more than my average episode, which again, it was really, really successful. It was my most successful episode of this year. Ever wondered who your audience is? Yeah, I have wondered. Let's break it down. So, again, listeners by age, again, I've already went through this, 18 to 24, 60%, blah, blah, blah. We already went through that. Listeners aged 30 to 34 grew the most by 69%. 69. Yeah, I'm a child, I know. But again, I managed to break into that 30 to 34 demographic. That grew by 39%, which again is incredible. So hello to you all. Where in the world have you been? So in 2024, your show has traveled the globe. You were streamed in 12 countries. United Kingdom was my top country. Your youngest listeners are in Mexico. Hello in Mexico. Thank you for listening. If you're from there, your oldest are from the UK. Hello, everybody from the UK. All my old beans, all my young beans in Mexico, and all my old beans in the United Kingdom. Thank you very much for listening. Your fans have great taste, obviously. Obviously, they do. They're listening to this podcast. Of course, they have good taste. Other than your show, they have also loved. So this bit, I might get a bit choked up for. And if I do, again, I apologize now, but there is a reason behind it, right? This part of Wrapped basically goes into explain what other shows that my listeners most listen to. And the number one is surprised me, because everybody who shared their Wrapped, they all had Joe Rogan as number one. And I thought, oh God, here we go. I'm going to look at my Wrapped and my number one's going to be Joe Rogan. Don't be wrong, I am a listener of Joe Rogan. You know, I am a listener to his show. I think most people are who do podcasts or listen to podcasts all listen to Joe Rogan. Not everybody, but most people do. And I thought, oh, here we go. I'm going to get Joe Rogan. So to look at my Wrapped and to see that the number one show that my listeners listen to is one of my favorite movie people ever means a lot to me. So at number one is the John Campea show. Now, for anybody who doesn't know John Campea, he is a movie journalist. He's a movie blogger. He started off doing the movie blog, and then he did AMC, and then he did Collider, and then he did his own show, the John Campea Show. Now, he is one of my favorite movie reviewers, movie journalists. There is. Again, I followed him since the AMC days, and I watched the AMC movie show, and then I watched Collider and like John Schnepp and all these incredible cast of people that he had on his show, and he still has on his show now. And I even followed him when he started doing his own sort of the John Campea Show. Like, generally, he is a big inspiration to me, and he is one of those people whose opinions of movies I take the most sort of credibility on. Like, I always forge my own opinion. If John is to say a movie is crap, I'm still going to watch a film, but it holds a lot more weight than it does if a random person just says the movie is terrible, right? So his opinion means a lot to me, and I take it very sort of close to the chest. And I'm a big fan of the John Campea Show. So, and this might be the part where I get emotional, we'll see. So it means genuinely the world to me to know that my listeners also listen to John Campea, but it's just that thought I have in my head is the fact of they've listened to John say talk about Venom 3, for example, and then they've gone, you know what? I've listened to John, I've listened to his show. I'm now going to go listen to Luke. I'm now going to get Luke's opinion on a movie. Oh God, I can already feel myself getting emotional. I'm going to listen to Luke's review on a film, and that means so much to me because John is one of the best out there. He is one of the best. And if you're not subscribed or listened to the John Campea Show, please do, because he is so good. So for someone who I hold very like an idol, I idolize, and I try to eat like the inspiration for how I do my movie reviews and things like that, and how I see films and that sort of thing. So to know that somebody I feel that way about, and my other listeners are listening to him, but also choosing not only to listen to him, but also listen to me and to follow me, means so much to me, because it shows that I'm doing something right, that I'm doing the right things, and that people are listening and people are interested for the same reasons that they're listening and interested to John Campea. Granted, I might never be as big as him, but he is an idol of mine, and I love his show. So, yeah, when I saw that, I got so happy. It means the world to me. So, yeah, again, it's very small potatoes, but it means the world to me. So, again, thank you very, very much. Number 2 is the Podcasts by Nerdcube. I love Nerdcube. I've been a big fan of Nerdcube. And again, this one means a lot to me because I've been following Nerdcube for years, since I was a teenager. I'm now 26. So, again, he does a really cool sort of zany, wacky sort of YouTube videos. He doesn't do sort of the standard game reviews anymore. He does a lot of challenges, a lot of sort of just weird and wacky, wonderful things. And what Matt does with Nerdcube and what he does with the podcasts is incredible. And again, it's the same thing with the John Campea Show. Is the fact that people are listening to the podcasts and then going, "Oh, I also want to listen to Luke." At the same time, again, another person who is fantastic, and I love his videos and his game reviews and things like that. And then to know that people are then going, I want to check Luke out. It just, I don't know. Again, small potatoes, but it's so appreciated. It really, really is. I don't think people will realize, and I can't put words in how much it means to me. But again, thank you very, very much. Number 3 is the Black Pants Legion podcast. I'll be honest, I've never heard of this podcast before, but looking at the art, it looks like some sort of D&D podcast, which if it is, that's awesome. I do want to get into D&D. I've been talking to Marie from Two Girls, One Reusable Cup for ages. And there was an original plan to start a D&D campaign with me, Marie, and a couple of other people. But it never went anywhere, mainly because I started a new job this year and I got so swamped and busy learning the ropes and learning how it works that I didn't have the time to do anything in terms of it. So hopefully this year, 2025, now that I've got the ropes of the job and I'm getting a lot more sort of confident and I know what I'm doing and not as worried, that I can find time to hopefully get into sort of D&D. But again, it's wonderful to see that if I am right, if it is D&D, that people are showing that connection with stuff that I do. And of course, at number 4 is Joe Rogan. To be honest, again, that didn't surprise me. I'm just happy that Joe Rogan is not the top 3. I'm happy that Joe Rogan is at number 4, and that it's like the John Campbell Show, the podcasts, and the Black Pants Legion podcast. It's like these sort of podcasts, that mean more to me than this idea that Joe Rogan. You know what I mean? So again, thank you for my followers for listening to those 3 shows, because again, especially the first 2 mean a lot to me. So thank you. And then at number 5 is Football Ramble. I think this is just Dan from Casting Views, and if it is, because again, I don't talk about football. I don't like football. I'm not really a football person, to be honest. So the only person I can think of who is a football fan that I know is Dan from Casting Views, and I think maybe the guy from Sizex Cinema as well. Maybe, I don't know. So that's the only thing I can think of. It's Dan from Casting Views. He listens to Football Rumble. I don't know that for sure. I'm just guessing. I'm just assuming, really. You should never assume, because you make an ass out of you and me, or you and I, or however it is. My dad says it. I don't know. It's a weird analogy. I've never really understood it. But yeah, so that's my guess in that. Number 5, Football Ramble is Dan from Casting Views. It has to be. Of course it is. I'm right. I'm never wrong. Anyway, as for music, so this is you guys. This is what you guys listen to. So number 1, apparently you guys listen to lo-fi. At number 2, it's new metal. And number 3, it's classical. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty rad, especially classical. I do like to listen to a lot of classical while I read. To be honest, I can listen to heavy metal while I read as well. It depends on the book, to be honest. It depends what's happening in the book. There are moments where I can put the radio on, and if there's like a certain moment that's in like a chapter, and I feel like, oh, this needs a bit more epic, sort of like, a bit of background noise, I can put a bit of heavy metal, sort of Dragon Force. If you've never heard of the band Dragon Force, check them out. But a bit of like, really cool guitar solos, put a bit of Dragon Force on in the background, and there you go. Or, if it's a very calm, relaxed, and I need it's like a fantasy, chilled out sort of version, then I'll put classical music on it. It depends, really. It's again, I'm a mood reader. I'm a mood listener. It depends on where the mood takes me, As for audiobook genres, again, as a bookworm, this bit I really, really enjoy. So at number 1, majority of you listen to mystery and thrillers, which is pretty cool. Number 2 is science and nature, which again, pretty cool. And number 3 is science fiction and fantasy, which again is really, really awesome, because again, I'm very much in the realm of sci-fi and fantasy anyway, in terms of my own reading as well as the podcast. And obviously mystery and thriller, they're quite popular. Science and nature was a surprise, to be honest. But again, I like it. I commend it, because I quite like science and nature and history and all that myself. So that's pretty cool. They didn't just listen. 61% of my audience watch videos on Spotify. I think that is just a dig at me, because again, Spotify's trying to push the video content a lot lately for a lot of people. Me personally, I don't really want to do video content. I like the anonymity, that word anyway, of doing podcasting. So I don't really want to show my face, but I think that's just a dig of like, look, 61% watch video, so you should do video. But one thing I want to mention about that is the fact of, I don't know if anybody's the same, and I do it with YouTube. It's not just Spotify. But if I'm watching a YouTube video, or if I'm listening on Spotify to a podcast, I'm paying attention. Like, I can multitask. I'm paying attention. But I'll be doing something else. I'm playing a game. I'm reading a book, or I'm doing the washing up, or I'm cleaning the house, or X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, right? I'm doing something else. So if it's a video, yeah, you've got a video, but I'm not really watching the video. I'm listening to the audio anyway. And I do it with YouTube things. Unless it's something I would need to focus on, like a game review or an in-depth sort of look into something or whatever, like it really needs my full attention, then I'll watch the video. Otherwise, 9 times out of 10, I'm listening to the audio of the video. So granted, yes, 61% of audiences watch video. Did they actually watch it? Like when I listen to the Joe Rogan Experience, unless it's a topic that I'm really fascinated in, like UFOs and aliens and things like that, I'm not really watching the video. I'm listening to it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. And I think a lot of people are the same, to be honest. Anyway, so shout out to my biggest fans for keeping me at the top of my game. Again, thank you to you all. I'm a top 10. for, hold on, I really hate this. So I'm the top 10 for show for 31 fans. Again, thank you very much to those 31 fans for making me one of your top 10. I'm a top 5 show for 20 of my fans, and I'm a number 1 show for 7 of my fans. Thank you absolutely much. My top fans listen to me 1.8 times more than my other listeners. So look, it's not me saying this. It's not me digging it. This is Spotify's analytics, all right? So don't shoot the messenger. I'm just saying, those 7 people are really embarrassing the rest of you. There's 126 of you all, okay? Do better. I'm only joking. I'm joking. I'm just. Don't shoot me. I'm just saying what Spotify says it's saying. I'm just reading what it says on the script. Okay, it's not my saying. It's Spotify. But yeah, you can do a bit better. Maybe. I don't know. What kind of creator am I? So this is currently like. This is. I don't like how they've done this. I was talking to Marie from Two Girls One User Cup. We were both basically taking the mick how they've done the rap this year. It feels like my first introduction to Canva. It generally feels so badly done, and it hurts the eyes, and it's so like the prior years were so good and vivid and incredibly done, and then this year it just feels very cheaply done. To be honest, though, it just hurts my eyes. Anyway, it's now loaded, so it goes. Your creator personality is the storyteller. No real information as to what that means, but I'm guessing it means that I talk a lot and I ramble. I would imagine. I'm a waffler, so I'm a storyteller. But that's fine with me. I like to waffle. Your fans have entered the conversation, have they? You got 9 poll votes. Yeah, that was mostly me, to be honest. But my most popular one was, what one do you think is the... Oh, yeah, that doesn't help at all because that could be any. Your podcast rating was 4.7. That's up from 4.6 last year. That is actually out of date. So it's currently at 4.8. And I've got 40 ratings. So if you haven't rated the podcast and you want to rate it, now's your chance. See if we can get it up to 4.9 and maybe even 5. The big 5.0. 5.0, shall we say, not the big 550, the big 5.0. Maybe we'll get it this year. But it is out of date. It's currently at 4.8 because I managed to get a few extra people to rate the podcast, and that took me up to 40 ratings, which then took me up to 48%. But again, it's still up from 46%, which again, it's gone up twice, which is again pretty good and shows that people are listening and people are enjoying it. So again, that's wonderful as well. Thank you for giving people something to talk about this year, but it's not over yet. Keep the conversation going and share with your fans. So that is the end of the Wrapped. What was my next topic I was going to talk about? Yes, YouTube. So this year with YouTube, it has been incredibly successful, to be honest, and I recommend YouTube to everybody. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse at some points because I say to people all the time of like, you need to get onto YouTube because at the end of the day, you want to be seen on as many platforms as possible. And in my early years, when I first started doing podcasting, again, wasn't as successful because, again, I was just starting out. I had to grow. So the best way to do that for me was like, well, if I go onto YouTube, if I just upload the audio, that even if it's not adding to the downloads and listens on Spotify, it's still people listening. And the episodes that are not doing as well, on say like Spotify, have a chance to do well and to be seen more on YouTube. And it was, and the proof is in the pudding that when I go to my most popular episodes, my top 5 episodes are all done from this year. So my number 1 most successful episode, right, was The Mummy. That was 7 months ago. As of recording this, it has got 15,000 views. Second most popular was Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, which is a strange one because I reviewed the first movie and it didn't do very well in terms of views. I don't think it actually broke the 100 mark at all, and neither did my review of the second film as well, Dead Man's Chest. I was just like, oh, okay, that movie didn't do as well, but I thought, it's okay. So I kind of got an idea of a feel of the average of like, okay, I like the Pirates movies, but the audience are not really feeling it. And then I posted my review of At World's End, and it got 8.5 thousand views. And I'm like, what the hell? Why? Why did this one be successful, but the first two wasn't? It just made no sense to me. Because again, especially how the last two movies, I did them back to back. I released Dead Man's Chest and then At World's End a week apart, and one didn't do that well at all, and the other one did. It blew my mind. But again, I don't question YouTube anymore because I don't know how it works, but somehow it works, and sometimes it does things that makes no sense, which I will then go on to explain now with the third most successful. The most successful of all time. Again, like I said, this year was my most successful year in podcasting, specifically as well in YouTube. Because again, the third one from this year was Rio 2. When I reviewed Rio 1, it did well, but didn't do as well as Rio 2 did here. For some unknown reason, 2.5 thousand views. I don't understand it. I don't. I reviewed the first movie and I was really positive about the first film. I really enjoyed the first Rio. It wasn't incredible, but I liked it. And then I watched Rio 2 and I didn't much like that film. I wasn't negative. I know negativity sells, but I wasn't negative. But for some unknown reason, that is the film that succeeds. It's so strange. It's so strange. I just can't explain it. But yeah, it's at number 3. At number 4, which I was really glad this one succeeded because I absolutely love this movie. I adored it. And again, it's a shame that this movie never got a sequel. It's a shame this film we'll never see anything else with this actor, with this version of the character. But it was my review of Tomb Raider from 2018. This film got 2.3 thousand views. Again, don't understand why, but at the same stage, it's like, I'm so glad it did because I was like, I love this movie. I do. And it didn't deserve to die. And I'm so glad people was like, yeah, I want to listen to that. And a lot of people did. And it was just, wow. Again, it's another one that surprises me of like, when I reviewed the first Tomb Raider, Tomb Raider, Lara Croft Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie, didn't do very well. Then I reviewed the second film, Lara Croft, the Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life, 2003. That got 1.1 thousand views, and I'm like, how, why? I'm like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. And this is what I mean. This is what I'm trying to say is the fact of I just don't question it anymore. I really, really don't. So that's the thousands. As for sort of moving on, the Cat in the Hat got 918 views. Now that could be because it's Cat in the Hat, and Cat in the Hat always does quite well on YouTube. I don't know, but again, that did quite well. Jack Frost, again, that was at 884. Charlie Brown is at 815. My review of Gladiator is at 520. I'm just looking for ones that came out this year. Again, we had Epic came at 231. My review of Transformers the movie from 1986, 215. Iron Giant, 196. Trying to look what else came. Eight-Legged Freaks was my most successful horror review, even though I know it's not a horror film, but it's my most successful Halloween review on YouTube. That came out 146 views. And then Critters is at 128. My most successful book review that I've ever done on YouTube, and again, it came out this year, was my review of Doctor Who, The Art of Destruction. So again, I started to notice patterns. I started to notice things that what's working on YouTube, what isn't working, what's being successful, what isn't. People really love animated movies, and I love animated movies, so that kind of pushed me to want to talk about more animated movies and things like that. So again, it's interesting. It really is. And I just wanted to quickly sort of mention it. But like I said, YouTube has been fantastic. I managed to, like, my goal was before Christmas I wanted to get to 200 subscribers. By obviously recording this currently now at Christmas, well, just before Christmas, it's currently at 252 subscribers, which is insane. And again, that's all because of, and it's all down to the analytics, because if I go onto the YouTube studio, it will go into a bit more detail. All those sort of new subscribers, they all came from my Mummy review. People were watching the Mummy and watching my review of it, and then decided to subscribe. And every single week, YouTube sends you a notification saying, "Look at your week in your week in YouTube, and basically you're most successful." And every single week since I released that episode, The Mummy has been top. Recently, so as I record this, in the last 48 hours, it has got 130 views. Pirates of the Caribbean, right, has got the at World's End. That's got 54 views recently in the last 48 hours. But again, is small peanuts, tiny numbers compared to what other YouTubers are doing. But it's just insane. And again, like I said, a lot of that is the Mummy. The Mummy. If I look back at this, it basically flatlined, right? So when it first come out on the Saturday, 29th of April, hardly anything, and it slowly started to pick up. It got to about 388 on Thursday, the 11th of June, and then all of a sudden, it just slowly starts to get bigger. And that on Monday, the 22nd of June, it's at 500. And then from there, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time we get to, say, the Tuesday, the 1st of October, it's at 8,708. And then we get to Tuesday, the 12th of November, it's at 13,000. And then we come all the way to today, as recording this, it is now at 15,344. And I've made 41 extra subscribers since. That's insane to me. That to be honest, it's given me more sort of drive. I need to hurry up and review the second Mummy, because if the first one did well, then looking at all the other ones, like I did the first movie, it didn't do very well. So when I did the sequel did better. So if the first one did good, then there is a potentiality that if I do the Mummy Returns, that will be good. It might not be. It might be the opposite now, but I might have jinxed it. But it kind of gives me that more of that sort of kick in the arse of like, I really need to review the Mummy Returns, because otherwise I'm missing out on potential subscribers. Again, I'm being silly, but again, it did make me think of like, cool, I need to potentially look into doing the Mummy Returns next year. So yeah, look forward to seeing that movie this year. I'm not going to rush it. I'm only joking. Like, I'm not going to rush into it just because of the success of the first film. I will get to it when I get to it. There are loads of other topics in sort of the queue first before I get to the Mummy, but I will look at the Mummy Returns possibly in the summer. So look forward to seeing that. And what was the next thing I was going to do after YouTube? Right. So this is what I do. I'd mainly just do this for me, because I quite like to. I love books. I do. I'm an avid reader, and it's one of them things that I wanted to do more for the podcast. Is I want to talk more about books and book reviews, and I started to do that. And I want to do it a bit more this year. I want to talk about books a bit more this year, but I don't. I'm currently looking to obviously doing the Torchwood books and Doctor Who books, and maybe a few more video game books. But I potentially want to branch out and look into sort of other books. Like last year, I tried to sort of branch out and look at the Mortal Engines series, and I looked at the Hunger Games books at one stage, and I want to look at other books like that. So that is sort of my plan, sort of going into sort of next year in terms of books. But this year, so I read 78 books. So on average, I tend to want to read 100 books a year. Obviously, because of my new job this year, I didn't have as much time as I used to. So the amount of books I've read this year, as recording this, is only at 78. I'm currently reading Watership Down currently. So that should hopefully be my 79th book. I'm trying to get to 80, basically. I know I won't get to 100 in the short amount of time I have left before sort of New Year's. So my goal is, if I can reach 80, I'll be happy, and I'm quite close. So I'll get there soon. But as of recording this, I've read 78 books, and I've read 17,153 pages. The shortest book that I read this year was a Terry Pratchett book, which was, I hate the name of this because I can't pronounce it, a college casting out of devilish devices. It's basically a short story set in the Discworld, where the the wizards come together and they debate upon what they perceive as devilish devices. It's only 6 pages, but it's quite funny, to be honest. The longest book I read this year was Skullduggery Mortal Coil. That was at 604 pages. The average book length that I read this year was 219 pages, which that also goes to speak about, again, not having a lot of time this year, and I wanted to read more books. So majority of the books I read this year were a lot shorter, which meant that by the time I got to December, all the books that I had left were like 500 to 600 pages, because I read all the shorter novels at the beginning of through the year. So I've just left myself with all the tomes now. That Warship Down, fantastic book, but it's about 500 pages. So I'm like, yeah, I know where I'm going to get to 100 now, but yeah, my average length is about 119 this year, which makes sense because I read a lot of short stories this year just to kind of catch up with myself. Most shelved. So this is a book that most people shelved. So it was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I think I'm butchering his last name. 5,660,854 people also shelved this book. The Alchemist, it's not terrible. It's kind of like a self-help book. It's an adventure book. Without going into spoilers, basically this young boy is a shepherd. He gets this vision that he needs to discover this hidden knowledge, and this hidden knowledge is hidden in Egypt, and that he needs to travel across the desert to Egypt to find this hidden knowledge. And within doing so, he learns a lot of lessons. And it's basically a self-help book wrapped in a story, which is fine. The reason I didn't like this book and the reason it didn't gel with me is because a lot of the lessons that the boy learns on his adventure, I've already learned. I won't go into it, but I'm a very spiritual person. I've done a lot of the spiritual isms. I've gone to. I've had I've gone through therapy. I've read a lot of self-help books. I've done a lot of self-exploration in myself and all this jazz. Again, I'm not going to go into it because it's a long, boring sort of process. But basically, a lot of the trials and tribulations and things that he learns, I've already been through. I've already done. I've already discovered and sort of already closed that, shall we say, book. And I've moved on to more advanced things. And that's why I couldn't enjoy it, because once I realized that it was preaching to me, it felt like it was preaching to me. It was like, if you don't do this, you're not doing it right. And I'm like, I've already done that. And this worked, but this didn't work, and blah, blah, blah. And again, this is the reason why I don't read a lot of self-help books, because a lot of them are very preachy. And a lot of sort of like, you're doing life wrong if you're not doing this. And I'm like, no, that's not how you should be. Anyway, I'm not getting into it because it's a whole different topic. The point is, it's a good book. And if you're in need of guidance, if you're in need of help getting navigating life, it is a good book. It is. But if you're like me and you've already been through a lot of the life and tribulations of life, and you've been through a lot of these awakenings and realizations and stuff like that, it might not be the book for you. This is very much for people who are beginning the journey, not who are already on the journey, basically. But yeah, so so my least shelved was Horrible Histories, Terrible Trenches Field book. 21 people shelved this. I bought this book ages ago, and it came in very handy when I did my Valiant Hearts review. I used it for a reference and for information to help me with that review, and I really enjoyed it. It's a pop-up book. It's for kids, but it's Horrible Histories, so it's fun, and so it's horrible facts done. So true facts done in a horrible, realistic way. Kind of like where when you get history, we get taught history in school. It's like it's boring, it's watered down. Horrible Histories gives you history, but leaves all the fun, juicy, gory bits in, basically. And I've always loved them. I adore them. I've got all the horrible history books. I've got all the horrible science books. I've never read the horrible geography, but one day I'll get round to it. But yeah, so I used that book for the Valiant Hearts review, but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. My average rating for 2024, this is star rating that I gave to books, was a 3.9. A lot of books this year disappointed me. They were very mid. They were very good. There was not many that I read this year that was excellent, that was like blow my socks off, 5 stars. Only a few really did that. But majority of the books were very sort of mid of the road, sort of 3 star, 3.5, sort of 4 star. So books, but so that works out 3.9. My highest rated book that I read this year was Spooky Lakes by Gio Rutherford. You might know her. She has a TikTok series that she talks about spooky lakes. My dad bought me this book. I'm actually holding the book in my hand now because I had it to hand because it was on my desk. It's a big, again, picture book. It's mostly tailored towards children, but if you like facts about lakes, about rivers, and about different sort of dangerous, spooky lakes from around the world, it is definitely a fantastic read. I gave it a 5-star, and it's currently got a 4.72 rating, so it is highly rated and highly adored by a lot of people. Yeah, really, really good. A lot of fun. My first review and the first book that I actually finished this year was for Blade Runner. I'm not going to read the review, but I gave it a 3-star. I liked it. I thought it was a good book, and I thought it was fantastic. I've actually never watched Blade Runner, and I will. That's something I'm going to change this year. I'm going to watch Blade Runner. I'm going to review it for the podcast. So again, another bit of trivia for you. This is why it's worth listening to this, because I drop hints and I drop sort of facts of things I want to look at in the future. But again, it was one of them with like, I liked the book, but it was good, but it didn't really pull me in as I was hoping it to. And like I said, I've never watched the Harrison Ford Blade Runner movie, and I haven't watched the sequel either because I haven't watched the first film. So I'm looking forward to this year watching Blade Runner, to reviewing it for the podcast, and then being able to watch the Blade Runner 2042, I think it's called, the sequel. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, I read many books this year. A few ones that stand out. So The Sign of the Devil by Oscar Demora was really, really good. Minute to Help, which was a Eighth Doctor, Big Finish sort of story. Again, Doctor Who, The Nightmare of Black Island was pretty good. Some Bill Bryson books. I listened to the Britney Spears autobiography, which is actually pretty fascinating, to be honest. A lot of Big Finish, so Lupus Garu, I think it's pronounced, which was a Big Finish one with Peter Davison and Mark Strickson, that had a vampire in it was in Brazil, in Rio. It was absolutely fascinating. Dust Bleeding with the Seventh Doctor, that was another fantastic one. I listened to a lot of Big Finish this year. Cobalt Red, that was a fascinating book, basically explaining Cobalt. Basically, I'm not going to get into it, but like, read that book and you'll realize that what is being done in the Congo to find cobalt is absolutely disgusting. But the problem is, we're all sort of helping towards it, because cobalt is a good conductor of electricity, which basically means it's good for phones, computers, any sort of microchip, basically anything electrical. So the more we advance in this world, the more we get electric cars, the more we need cobalt, basically. So the more the modern world advances, the more we're going to need this metal, which means the more depravity and harsh and slavery and cruelty and all this really diabolical things is going to happen to the Congo, and the Congo is going to get destroyed for it. So yeah, it's a very eye-opening book, and Cobalt Red is definitely a one I recommend reading. It's probably not one you can do anything about, but it's very much of like, it's a good eye-opener and keeps you very sort of aware of what you're doing. It kind of, to me, it was very much the fact of, I don't want, like, do I need a new phone? Do I need the brand new console? Do I need a new computer? Blah, blah, blah. Because if I do, then I'm just adding to the problem. Whereas if I just keep what I already have and run it for as long as I need to, and then buy the upgrade, it's not so bad. You know what I mean? But yeah, I leave other people's opinions to check that out. Cobalt Red, fantastic. Colditz, which was another Doctor Who, Cecil McCoy and Sophie Aldridge story, that was incredible. That was amazing. I think it was the first time David Tennant did anything in Doctor Who, where he played a Nancy Commandant in Colditz, and it was incredible. Absolutely, really, really good. So many twists and turns, so great. Gears of War, Anvil Gate, that was really good as well. I'm trying to think what else. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doherty. That really opened my eyes, and actually, I'm very sort of a deaf positive person. That was incredible. I gave it 5 stars, and that's the one I recommend to people. Doctor Who Neverland. That is a Lala Ward, and got Eda Fisher, and it's got Paul McGann, and yeah, it does incredible. It really, really good, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. I'm trying to think what else. American Psycho didn't much enjoy. The Shadow Glass, again, I was planning on doing an episode on that. Basically, the Shadow Glass is basically if you grew up with like the Muppets and like the Jim Henson Company and like Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal, is basically a love letter, an homage to those things. And if you love them as much as I do, you're gonna love that book. Shadow Glass was incredible. I think the last book I actually read was Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I gave it a 2.5. I did not enjoy that book at all. I really didn't. And I hate to say it just wasn't what I was hoping it to be. And I watched the film recently and I found it so boring. I couldn't get into it. It's so slow, nothing happens. And it's the same reason why I didn't enjoy the book is because I couldn't get into the book because the book was so slow and it takes forever for things to happen. And same with the movie. I thought, oh, we had the movie, it might pick up the pace. No, the movie's just slow as well. It's like I don't know what's going on and I'm not enjoying it. And it's a shame because it's a fantastic cast in the film. It's a high regarded book. And it was one of those of like is it hype? What is it that killed it for me? You know what I mean? So that's the last book I read. Was Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. It's a shame I didn't enjoy it, but again, it is what it is. You can't enjoy everything. You know what I mean? So yeah. So overall, looking at sort of my year, podcasting, to be honest, one of my biggest conclusions is that I watched and reviewed so many movies. I actually became a movie review podcast mostly. He's going to love it that I've mentioned him this many times, but even Sean from Review It Yourself, we have a running joke between us sort of thing. And when he basically says to me, he goes, once I saw that you were doing movie reviews, he's like, damn, I've got to up my game because now like Luke's doing them. And things like that. And it wasn't intentional. It generally was the fact of, and I've mentioned this before, but when I first started the podcast, I did a list of topics that I wanted to cover. And I can't remember how many I got out of my mind. And then I remember posting it onto Twitter at the time. And I basically said to everybody, what topic and ideas would you like me to look at on the podcast? And I wrote, a lot of the good ones down and stuff like that. And over time, that list has grown and grown and grown. And I had planned for this year to crack on with that list and do a lot of topics. Majority of them are movies, admittedly. But the idea was I'm going to crack on with it. I'm going to do it. And the problem is, Summer Game Fest came up and then I was doing Mass Effect month. And then out of nowhere, I also had to do, well, not had to do, but I also out of nowhere, it was like, it's now October. Now I'm doing spooky season. Now Christmas is here and I'm doing Christmas movies and things like that. And this year just went by so quickly that it was one of those of us like, I always try my best to do variety. Because I don't want to be known just for one thing. I want to be like, if I do a movie review and movies and you're not a movie fan and it's not for you, that's fine because next week you'll get a video game or next week you get a book review or next week you'll get something like Studio Ghibli, an anime sort of review, or you'll get something else basically. So I basically with the show, I try to make sure that I cater to everybody, but by also still covering things that I like and enjoy. And that's the sort of long and short of it is that I try to make sure that one week would maybe be a movie, one week would be a game, another week would be a book and X, Y, and Z. And it kind of goes from there just so that I do something for everybody, but also cover things that I enjoy because I don't just love movies. I also love video games. I love reading. I love TV shows and nostalgia, and I've got other topics that not just cover those sort of demographics either. So yeah, this year I looked at a lot of movies, and this 2025 I'm going to look at movies as well. But I want to do a lot more books. I want to do a lot more TV shows, and again, I want to look at video games in a lot more. And I've got a plan, an idea of how to look at more video games without having to do single reviews. Long form single reviews. I can do short reviews in a very sort of one sort of big episode, multiple game reviews in one short episode. I've got an idea. It's not an original idea, but it's like I've got an idea of how I can do that, so I can talk about video games more. Again, with books, books take a lot more time, but I'm hoping that I can talk a lot more books and not just sort of not just video games or like Doctor Who, sort of that sort of thing. I also want to look into doing other books, like carrying on the Mortal Engine series, for example, or looking at other books like Inkheart and stuff like that, which I've already read Inkheart. But as an example, I want to look at other sort of novels that are not just video game related. So that's sort of what I'm hoping for the future. Really, is to kind of just carry on. So the ship, as it is going fine. The ship's not sinking. The ship, if anything, is actually sped up and is actually doing quite well. There are no icebergs in the way. There was one, but I swerved it and changed the name of the ship so that iceberg never hits me again. So the ship's going fine. The SS Howdy Bean is on a good course. Like I said, there are other things I want to look at. There are things that I want to do. I'm also going to hopefully do a lot more collabs with a lot of people. I had to put a lot of collabs off this year because, again, starting a new job, getting my feet, understanding what's going on. So I lost a lot of opportunities to work with a lot of different podcasts, but I am planning on hopefully doing a lot more, and now I'm getting a lot more settled and doing things with more people. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me on other podcasts and things like that. Yeah, I have a lot of ideas. I've still got, and I'm going to get it here. I've still got in front of me right now my original list. It's all crinkled and horrible because it's been in my desk for ages. Originally, it was 30 ideas. It's now gone up to 40. And this year, I've only crossed a few of them off. So, like, for example, so one of them was like Iron Giant. And then under that, it was like Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy. And then I did the trilogy. I really enjoyed myself. And I'm like, well, if people want me to look at the last two films, which I'm not a big fan of, I will do it, but only if people want me to. And I had a huge backlash. Well, not backlash, but huge people going, you can't look at the trilogy without finishing off the last two films. I'm like, okay, fine. So I added it to the list of like, okay, do last two movies in 2025. So you get the last two Pirates movies this year. Again, I started my £5 game reviews. So because I started that series, I crossed it off. Cat in the Hat, did that. Mass Effect breakdown of those episodes, I've done that. I've still got to do Mass Effect Andromeda, but again, that will come in the summer. The Lara Croft, again, I'm playing. I looked at all the movies. Now this year, I want to look at all the games, so that should be a lot of fun. Again, little sneak peeks to those people that stay to the end. And then the next page, I've hardly touched anything here. To be honest, obviously I'm not going to say these ideas because a lot of them are very random. But again, like for example, one of them is not really a movie review. It's a movie that I heard on the Doom Generation that they talked about. I watched the film. It's freaking weird, but I really enjoyed it. And I want to talk about it because it's. But how can I explain it? It's so smart and so clever that I wish there was more movies like it, and I can't talk about as to why, because then I'll give away what the movie is. But it's a movie that I want to look at. I might not look at it this year. It might be one I do in 2026. But again, it's on the list. I will get around to it eventually. I'm like George R.R. Martin. I will do it eventually. You've just got to bear with me. I will write that book eventually. Just let me write, basically. But yeah, there's a lot of cool ideas. There's some really small, there's some silly ones, to be honest. I actually had one that I wrote down recently and I put a question mark next to it because it was one of those where it was like, I don't know what I was watching. I was just watching something on the TV, and then this idea for this series of films, animated movies came out, and I'm like, should I do it? And I wrote it down and I went, question mark? Because I'm like, no one will listen to it. Nobody will. But I think it's hilarious. And because I find it hilarious, I will like, screw it. I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? So I wish I could share it, but I currently can't because, again, it's so funny that I just want to it to be a surprise. But yeah, so there's a lot on this list that I want to do. And look, I want to look at one thing I do want to talk about though is that when I want to look at movies this year, my favorite movie of all time is Amelie. And that's not an English movie, that's a French film. And there are so many great non-English speaking movies out there, and I want to look at a lot more French films. I want to look at films that are not made here in the UK, films that are not English, and so I want to look at a lot more movies like that. Again, I want to look into those sort of things. I want to explore, because like one thing with this podcast is the fact of I don't do what everybody else does, and I pride myself on that. I pride myself on, if everybody's talk, I always use Starship Troopers as an example, and Starship Troopers is on the list. I will get around to that one eventually, but I want to read the book first. But if everybody's talking about Starship Troopers, I want to be the guy who's talking about Barney. You know what I mean? Like, it's so random, but the point is I'm trying to make is the fact of it's kind of like what Syndrome said in The Incredibles. When everybody's super, no one will be. If everybody is talking about Starship Troopers, it loses its magic. It loses its specialness. You know what I mean? Whereas if everybody's talking about Starship Troopers, and then you see somebody talk about the Barney movie, for example, then it's like, oh, you know what? I remember Barney. I'm getting a bit bored of Starship Troopers. I'm going to go check out the weird bloke talking about Barney for an hour or 30 minutes or whatever long the review is. You know what I mean? And that's my thinking, is the fact of I'd rather be the guy that does the weird, wacky and wonderful than does what everybody else does because it gets the views, because it gets the listens. I'm not that person. I've never been that person. And that's why I do a lot of random things. And just looking at that list, I have to giggle at myself because some of them are like, that won't work. No one will listen to it. But I find it hilarious. And because I find it hilarious, I'm like, I'm going to do it anyway. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know what the future is going to hold for 2026. I'm hopefully looking at the data and looking at the analytics and stuff and all that sort of technical jargon. Looking at all, things did pick up in November and they're picking up currently in December. So my only hope, fingers crossed, is that going into January, February, March, April, May, and like the rest of the year, things are going to get pick up, and people are going to start going to get a lot more views and get a lot more people subscribing, a lot more people following on Spotify and things like that. And I can only see it getting bigger and being more successful. And that's the hope, really, at the end of the day. So my main sort of goal and my overall sort of wrapping up here is the fact of I just hope that when I get around to doing this again for my review of my 2025 year, which will be my 4th year podcasting, by the way. Hopefully by then I can say, oh, we got so many extra subscribers, we got so many extra downloads, so many extra listens, and this mad crazy review that I did on a whim because I thought it was hilarious was really, really successful. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be able to sit here and say my top 5 favorite topics I did this year was this random film and that random topic and that random thing and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? So, yeah, the ship's fine. We're going to keep going. We've changed the name, but I'm still the same. I'm still the same Luke the Human. I'm still that guy. I'm still that being. So, yeah, thank you very much for listening. I've just realized I've been talking for an hour and 27 minutes. So I do apologize. But thank you if you've got this far. It really does mean a lot to me. Like I said, this month in January, when this comes out, is going to be my birthday month. So I am planning on looking at and talking about some special films that mean a lot to me. And it's part of a tradition, but I won't give anything away. For one, I've already been talking for too long, and 2, it's a surprise. So the next 3 weeks are going to be quite fun, and if anything, we'll start the podcast off with a bang. Hopefully, fingers crossed. We'll see. Anyway, I've been your host, Luke the Human. You've been listening to the Howdy Beans podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys.